Welcome to the Joy of Cruising podcast with your host, award-winning author Paul C. Thornton, a weekly conversation with the amazing cruisers featured in the Joy of Cruising trilogy, comprised of The Joy of Cruising, Cruising Interrupted, and new release, The Joy of Cruising Again. Each book is a compilation of features about cruisers and cruise and travel personalities from around the world. It's the next best thing to cruising, hearing about cruising from the unique and diverse perspectives of Paul's amazing guests.
Hello, passionate cruisers. This is Paul, and this week on the Joy of Cruising podcast, I am delighted to welcome Mr. Scott Eddy. In a section called The Globetrotters, I wrote about Scott in Cruising Interrupted. And a Globetrotter Scott is, whether by land or sea or literally. Scott is the television host of the first travel series ever on Lifetime TV called Video Globetrotter. And right on his website and social media, it says Innovator, Trendsetter, Globetrotter. At Mr. Scott Eddy, as he is known on social media, where he is among the world's most popular travel personalities, has taken somewhat of a circuitous route to arrive at his current designation as one of the top travel influencers in the world. A Forbes magazine profile stated that Scott Eddy is consistently rated as one of the top 5 luxury travel influencers in the world. Yet, travel wasn't even Scott's first career, although he traveled quite a bit with his family in his youth. Before travel, he found success in financial services as a stockbroker. But if not for a tragic twist of fate, Scott would have ended up neither in investments nor travel, but as a police officer. Scott has over 100 cruises, but he transcends cruising. He lives in South Florida, but from following his whereabouts on his social media, you're as likely to find him anywhere in the world, abroad or in the U.S., on a given day. Welcome, Scott, to the Joy of Cruising podcast.
Thanks, Paul.
So how you doing?
I'm doing good. You know, travel, I'm in between a few trips. I'm actually on a trip, but I'm on the west coast of Florida. So if I'm still in Florida, I really don't count it as a trip.
We have to come up with a board game. Where in the world is Mr. Scott Eddy? So before we discuss the route you took that culminated in your current standing in the industry and your own television show, just tell our listeners about yourself in general, where you're from, where you grew up, where you live, and whatever else you would like to share.
Well, I was born in Michigan and moved down to Fort Lauderdale when I was 3 and spent basically my whole childhood up until I was 29 living in the same house in Fort Lauderdale. And then lived in Europe and Asia for 17 years. Came back to the States in 2015, and here we are now.
As they say, the rest is history. So I, in the introduction, I alluded to the circuitous path you took, really from childhood when your dad was a police officer, to stockbroker, an investment advisor, to moving to Asia, to the travel icon that you are today. So talk about that path.
So, yeah, it's very unconventional. Nothing that I'm doing today was planned. You know, my whole life was pretty much mapped out at a very young age because my family, they're mostly police officers. So I grew up spending my time at the police department. I took my driver's license test in a police car. I watched my first autopsy when I was like 13, 14 years old. My path was I was going to finish high school, join the police academy, become a cop, get married, have the 2.5 kids, the white picket fence, retire and die. Like, it was very cut and dry. So I had a date to join the police academy right after high school. And 3 weeks before I graduated high school, my father was killed in the line of duty. in a plane crash, and it turned my whole world upside down, and nothing was ever the same. I obviously didn't go down the path of being a cop. I thought it would have been too hard. And I ended up, a friend of a friend knew somebody at this investment banking firm and got me into the training program, knowing nothing about that industry, being a horrible student in school, having no college degree. And I took to it and learned how to sell from the best in the business. And I was a stockbroker for 10 years. And then they, fast tracked towards the end. They sold the firm. I resigned. But the guy who sat next to me, his good friend was an expat living in Bangkok. And every time he used to visit, he always used to tell me, you got to come over there. You'll love it. I always used to say, I don't have time. I have a normal job. I can't take a 24-hour flight. The normal excuses that people with 9-to-5 jobs give. And then when I had no job, he's like, listen, you have no excuse. Get your butt over here. So I went over and loved it and didn't come back. I ended up living in Bangkok for 11 years. And I was over there when social media started. And on a whim, I started the first digital agency in Southeast Asia. And all my clients were hotels. And that's where I learned the whole business.
The story of how your route to being a police officer suddenly changed. I tell that story in Cruising Interrupted, which I featured you in, of course. And every time I read that passage, it is just so poignant. But I tell you, the part that really throws me, I can't imagine an itinerant traveler like you sitting behind the desk of an investment firm.
Yeah, well, there wasn't a lot of sitting. I've never been one to keep quiet and not move around and this and that. So yeah, looking back on it now, it seems very strange. But it was the fact, and it taught me the core values of sales, which I use every day of my life, and I think it makes me a better. I think it's kind of strange to say, but I think sales makes me a better traveler, just because having that experience, and sales is at the core of everything that you do in life. So I think it makes me a better human.
So what drew you back to the U.S.?
Well, as social media matured, and after selling my agency years before this, but social media started to get mature, and my brand was also starting to get developed and matured. I started to get a lot of offers and conversations with big brands, but they were all revolving around having a US audience, being based in the US. You really don't, as a travel industry is concerned, people really don't understand how important the American traveler is to the industry. And, these brands, they want you based in the US. So I was getting having conversations with, companies like Air New Zealand and New Zealand Tourism, Singapore Air, but they were wanting the routes from the US to be promoted. They were more interested in the US traveler than any other traveler. So it just made sense. So I came back, tested it out, and I'm still here. But having said that, I don't have a home. I live in hotels in between trips. So I'm very fluid. Even though I'm technically based in the US, I'm still very fluid to where I'm based in between my trips. It could be anywhere because I just have clothes. I own nothing. I sold everything about 10 years ago.
It's funny. When I interviewed you a couple of years ago for Cruising Interrupted, you told me you didn't even have a TV. And at the time, you were about to launch a television program.
I do not own a TV. I haven't owned a car since '99. I don't have an apartment. I don't own a couch. I own nothing. And I love it that way.
Can you drive?
Of course I can drive.
Okay.
Having said that, I think I need to renew my driver's license, even though I haven't driven in about 3 years.
Okay. So upon your return to the States, you started cruising, or should I say
Mhm.
restarted cruising, because you did cruise as a child. You missed out on the mega ship boom that took place while you were in Asia. So when you got back, talk about getting into that mode of travel.
Yeah, so growing up in Fort Lauderdale, I mean, we used to be, before Miami built their mega port, we used to be the cruise capital of the world. So I grew up cruising. And then, yes, you're right. When I moved overseas, I didn't cruise for
Mm-hmm.
about, I think, 15 years, something like that, maybe 16. Uh, and yeah, I missed out on the big cruise ships, but I still have not been on any of the big cruise ships. The biggest cruise ship to date that I've ever been on was I did the launch, the
Mm-hmm.
inaugural for the Celebrity Beyond, which I think is only 3,200. And I'm about to do Princess in Norway,
Mm-hmm.
Princess for the first time, I might add, in August. And I think that's 3,400. But I've still never done RCL,
Mm-hmm.
NCL. I've
Mm-hmm.
never done any of the 4, 5, 6, 7,000 passenger cruise lines yet. But I love cruising. But my sweet spot is definitely 1,000 persons and less. I love Azamara. They're all at 1,000. I love the river cruise ships. I love the expeditions. I think those are so much more interesting. And they
Mm-hmm.
go to the weird ports,
Mm-hmm.
the ports that are hard to get to, the ports that, I mean, anybody can do the Caribbean, anybody can do the Med,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but I like going to the weird places, the places that aren't very commonly visited.
From following you on social media, your cruise travel tends towards, relative to mine, tends towards the more exotic. Although I can say one thing we have in common, I have been on Celebrity Beyond. How'd you like that?
Oh, what a beautiful ship. I mean, really,
Tell
really,
me about
like
it.
really, really gorgeous.
Yep, yep. And then you mentioned river cruising. I want to talk to you about that because I just booked my first river cruise. It's over a year away. Got a long time, but so talk about what are some of the river cruise ships you've been on?
Well, I just did Riverside Luxury Cruises, which they are a very new river cruise company. They're the company that bought all the old Crystal ships and they're redoing them and launching them. So we just did a river cruise down the Danube and we did all of Eastern Europe. That was tremendous. And I'm probably doing their second ship sometime late September, early October, that they're going to be doing all of France. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really nice. I mean, just river cruising, you're so connected to the destination. I mean, you're so close. Have you done a river cruise?
No, no, this will be my first coming
Oh, you're
up.
gonna you're gonna love it. You're gonna really love it. It's really it's like you're on your own boat, but you have a captain.
Mm-hmm.
It's wonderful. I mean, you're so connected to the destination. You're stopping in all these small towns and whatnot. It's just great. It's fantastic.
I hear great things about the food.
Who are you sailing with?
I'm selling with Amma Waterways, Amma Christina.
Oh, Emma. Yeah. Oh,
Uh,
nice.
have you
I
been on
haven't done Emma.
Amma? No? Okay.
I have not. I have not. I've done a lot of Viking River, and I've just did the Riverside. But I've actually never done another company. But I
Mm-hmm.
did Viking like 8 or 9 times in Europe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What are some of the other highlights of your cruising career? Now, I thought I heard you mention expedition.
Yeah, I've done Antarctica.
Oh, wow.
That was a tremendous experience. Yeah, yeah, we did. Actually, it was during the pandemic. It was December 2021, and um, it was great. It was really fantastic. I mean, once you got there, once the flight was over and you did all the testing and you actually got
Mm-hmm.
where you were in your own bubble, it didn't feel like the pandemic was going on because
Mm-hmm.
you're going to a
Mm-hmm.
place where there's no people. It was just fantastic. It was a really,
Mm-hmm. Now,
it was
what
a
did
special
you
moment.
say? What line that was on?
Atlas Ocean Voyages.
Okay. Okay. So, of course, cruising came to a screeching halt a couple of years ago. Although that didn't stop you, because you just mentioned that you went on expedition cruise during the pandemic. Generally, how did you spend your time during the lockdown? Do anything new and different?
Well, yes. Obviously, like everybody else, business came to a halt, and I pre-pandemic, I spoke at probably 20, 25 conferences around the world per year. And
Mm-hmm.
while travel has came back, I haven't picked up the speaking gigs like I did before, but they'll come back. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
big believer in that. And
Mm-hmm.
I was grounded. I mean, again, I was in Florida, so Florida opened up right away. I was grounded for about 7 months, like hardcore grounded.
Mm-hmm.
And then the road trips started to pick up, road trips, and Mexico started doing trips down there. And I actually did a few really big trips during the pandemic. We did an Alaska cruise with Uncruise, which, in my opinion, there is no better way to see Alaska than on Uncruise. It's small
Mm-hmm.
ships. You're on the ship with 30, 40, 50 other people max, and they go down all the way, all the little alleyways that the big ships can't go down. And it's just, they really do it special. Uh, they really
Mm-hmm.
do it right. And I did a safari in Kenya as soon as Kenya opened up, and then we did Antarctica. So I did a couple of big ones
Mm-hmm.
during the pandemic.
Safari in Kenya.
Yeah,
Wow, that's definitely on my bucket list. I know we chatted a little bit about that
yeah.
in Cruising Interrupt. Just say something about that. Everything you said, I was just mesmerized to hear.
I mean, listen, I know it's not cruising, but there is nothing on the planet like doing a safari. And I've only done them in
Mm-hmm.
Kenya. I've done them 4 times in Kenya, and it's a magical experience. And the first 2 times I've done
Mm-hmm.
it, I did the exact same properties, the exact same safaris, and they were completely different because you can't, wildlife is different every day. So it's just,
Yeah, unpredictable.
yeah, there's nothing like it. I think that
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
everybody, especially kids, should do it once in their lifetime because it just, I've seen families down there with their kids, and I know it's just something that they'll remember for the rest of their life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the pandemic came to an end, and what was your first cruise once the pandemic officially ended? Well, not officially, and
Yeah.
once cruising started back up.
Yeah, I mean, that's hard because the pandemic ended at different times in different countries. So you really
Uh,
can't predict that. But I
mm-hmm.
started really going hard in cruising, I would say 2021,
Mm-hmm.
2022. I've probably done, going back to 2021, 2022, in those 2 years, I probably did 15, 16 cruises.
Wow. What
Yeah, I mean,
name name
cruising
name
came
a
back
couple
hard.
name a couple of vessels.
Well, I've did Azamara, I think 6 or 7 times in the past 2 years, and I might be hopping on there for a couple more cruises this summer all over Europe.
Mm-hmm.
But Azamara, it's just a special brand. And now that they've broken away from RCL and they're their own company, they do things different.
Mm-hmm.
Larry Pimentel back in the day, just an absolute class act. He built the brand. He made the brand what it is. Now he's CEO of Four Seasons cruise line that's coming out in a few years, but he's just a class act, and he put the just everything that Azamara stands for in place, and they just kept the ball and ran with it. And they're a very, very special cruise line, and the staff is they're unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
Like really, really unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
You go on Azamara Cruise, and if you just sit there, and I do this often, you sit at the lobby bar, you sit around the pool, and you just hear other guests talking. Because inevitably they're comparing cruise lines, they're talking about this one, talking about that one. If anybody ever brings up Azamara, the only thing that they're talking about is the staff.
Mm-hmm.
Because the staff on there is they're special. They become family and friends immediately.
What else have you cruised on since the restart?
Who have I cruised with? I've done, Celebrity. I did that, Celebrity Beyond, Azamara, Riverside, Atlas. I've done Atlas Ocean Voyages. I've done 4, maybe 5 in the beginning of 2021. We did a really cool one with them. I did all around Ireland, which was very, very interesting. And we also did one that did Svalbard, which is off the coast of Norway, and also Greenland, Iceland. That was very unique as well.
Now, in the intro, I alluded to Video Globetrotter. So tell our listeners a little bit about that, how did it come about, what's the status, so on and so forth.
So when I came back to the States, I met someone named Kristen, who's now a dear friend. She's a very close friend of mine. She owned a PR agency in South Florida, and she represented a production studio that had about 7 shows between Lifetime and Fox Business. And they had a travel show that was just sitting on the shelf collecting dust. And she pitched me to be the TV host. And we met. They liked me. We launched. Unfortunately, by the time we got done filming the first episode and launched, we were about a month into the pandemic. So it premiered during the pandemic, which was very unfortunate, but we powered through and we ended up filming like about 5 episodes, and it did very well. But the show has not canceled, but it also has not been brought back. So there's still a show. It's still on Lifetime. It's still alive, but it hasn't been resurrected post-pandemic yet.
Do you know if our listeners can see past episodes?
Of course. You can go to videoglobetrotter.com, or I think they're on YouTube as well. Just do a Google search for Video Globetrotter and they should pop up. Okay. Or if you search for my name on YouTube, I think some of the episodes pop up on there as well under my name.
Well, there you go, listeners. I've viewed them, and Scott is a natural, so a lot of fun. What are you up to now, Scott?
Right now, I'm on the west coast of Florida. I'm working with a big hotel group called Ocean Properties, and I'm staying at one of their gorgeous resorts called Lido Beach Resort in Sarasota. And I'm here until Friday, and then I'm not sure what I'm doing from Saturday to the following Saturday, but then I go to Jamaica for 10 days, and I'll be down there for a big food festival and for a hotel anniversary party. It's called the Rock Hotel, ROK. It's the newest hotel in Kingston. So I'm going down there for their first year anniversary.
Oh, wow. That sounds wonderful. Let me know if you need somebody to carry your bags.
I will do.
So how can fans follow you on social media and the internet?
I'm easy to find. I'm at Mr. Scott Eddy everywhere on all platforms, and mrscotteddy.com is my website.
There you go. What do you have booked? Let's talk about the future.
I don't know. I'm I unlike most people in this industry, I prefer longer trips. So I'm actually talking about doing a couple round the world cruises with bigger brands. So that might be an announcement coming up
Mm-hmm.
sometime soon for 2024. And that would be interesting because I've never done it. The longest I've ever stayed on a ship was 6 weeks, and that was 2 3 week back to backs. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm down for it. I could live on a cruise ship.
Uh-huh.
I love cruising because I think it's the simplest, stress-free way to travel. You unpack once and the countries come to you. And any headaches that come along the
Mm-hmm.
way, the staff takes care of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's bad weather and the captain reroutes to somewhere different, or just your only responsibility is to get to the ship. Once you get to the ship, your stress is
Mm-hmm.
over. You know, that's why I love it.
I'm with you, Scott. I could live on a cruise ship. My wife thinks differently, though.
Yeah, you have to please for two.
Yep, yep. So I always ask this of my guests, but it's a tough question. I always ask, what's on your bucket list? But your life is a bucket list. So let me put it this way: what's on your bucket list? Not just travel, but travel and otherwise. What do you want to accomplish in this life?
You know, I don't set goals like that. I just go as hard as I can every day, and I let what will happen
Mm-hmm.
happen. I think that if you lead a good life and surround yourself with good people and always try to do the right thing with others and give as much as you possibly can, I believe good things will happen. You know, I had plans once. I had a strict life that was set in stone and it all got taken away. So now I just try to do my best and focus on today, and whatever happens tomorrow will
Mm-hmm.
happen. And I think of my life like a startup. I'm always nimble. I'm always able to pivot overnight, and whatever happens along the way
Mm-hmm.
happens.
Mm-hmm.
But the most important thing is just surround yourself with good people. So, you know, you can take, I've lost every penny that I've had twice.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, that matters. Like the, the rating of that matters in my life is like one. I could care less about that because it's the people, it's my relationships that is why I was able to bounce back twice. And, you know, it's not about the money.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it's easy to say if you have nothing and you're looking at somebody that has everything. But I can promise you, for somebody who's lost everything twice, I can promise you it's not about the money,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because there's a lot of things out there where money can't control, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, I like the way you mentioned how you once had everything laid out for you, and you pretty much had a roadmap, and it didn't happen. So having lost everything twice, and then lost your dad under sudden and tragic circumstances, you're probably positioned to deal with anything.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I go all in for whatever I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's I concentrate on the day. I make the most of every day, and I make the most of every experience that I'm involved with.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I try to bring as many people as I can along the road, because there's no fun doing it alone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Scott, before we let you go, a couple of light cruise questions or fun questions, and then perhaps an oddball question that doesn't really relate to cruising. So, in all your cruises, I think I saw somewhere on social media earlier in the year, you just went over 100 cruises, right?
I did. I'm at 104 right now.
Okay. So give me some ideas. What's your favorite cruise? or travel drink and food?
So when I travel, no matter where I am, even if I'm on a ship, but I'm in a certain country, I try to eat as local as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as drink is concerned, while I drink wine a lot because I do a lot with the wine industry, my mother was born in Jamaica, so I grew up drinking rum. Rum is always my drink of choice. It's always my number one.
Mm-hmm. So, what's the most? You say you try local food. Anything? What's the most? What's the right word? Adventurous.
The most adventurous that I've ever got with food is when I lived in Bangkok. We went to a Nigerian restaurant in Bangkok, and I tried to eat monkey brains.
Okay. All righty. As they
Well,
say,
you asked.
all righty then. I look at you.
Listen,
I look at you, Scott, as a travel role model. But that's one behavior I will not be following. So, monkey brains. Okay. Uh, uh, that probably could answer this next question. My next question is: what's your most wonderful, or memorable, or even embarrassing cruise or port experience?
um, and I'll go back to Azamara. So they do this thing called As Amazing Evenings,
Mm-hmm.
which they bring everybody off the cruise ship. And I don't know, have you done Azamara before?
No, no.
Okay. So they have this
No,
thing.
they're based in UK, right?
No, they're based in Miami,
Oh,
but they have four ships and they
not sure.
they go everywhere.
Not sure why I haven't done Azamara. Okay.
I don't know. Um, so they have these things called As Amazing Evenings, and they bring
Mm-hmm.
everybody off the ship and they put on a very like a deep dive into the local culture, the local music, the local food, the local everything. And they put on these events and they're just wonderful. So the first time I sailed with them, I did a New Zealand intensive, 28 days all around the North and South Island in New Zealand. And that As Amazing Evening it's still,
Mm-hmm.
it's still in my head, and it's still one of the best experiences I've ever seen on a cruise line.
Sounds wonderful. So the oddball question: you have a huge following, a huge and fervent following, and welcome to the many Mr. Scott Eddy fans who are listening. Share one thing that my listeners and your fans don't know about Scott.
That's a tough question because I'm pretty open with my audience. I mean, my personal life and my business life is pretty much the same. There's no wall in between.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question. What people don't know. Uh, Everybody knows I have a sister and she has a daughter. I'm very close with them, and I have went on multiple trips with them and highlighted them on social. I I I honestly I have no idea. I don't know what people would want to know that they don't know about me already. I don't know.
Your your life is truly an open
It's
book.
yeah, I have nothing to hide, and it is what it is. Like I throw everything out there. I believe,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
anybody who sees, you know, any of my videos or anything that I ever post and then they meet me in real life, I'm exactly the same. I don't believe in putting a
Mm-hmm.
filter
Mm-hmm.
on my social media and then acting a different way in real life.
Okay. So before I let you go, Scott, I want to thank you, first of all, for being allowing me to profile you, feature you in Cruising Interrupted, and also in my new book, The Joy of Cruising Again. I opened it up with a quote from you, and it's funny because when I started writing the book, the cruising world was in a state of suspended animation, so we weren't going anywhere. But your quote was so prescient and so so what's the term? Glass half full. And by the time, of course, the book came out, cruising was back, and it's back as strong as ever. And so I'm so glad that I chose you to deliver that opening quote. So thank you for that, and thank you for coming on the Joy of Cruising podcast. I know that you're a very, very busy individual. As I mentioned, Forbes considers you one of the top luxury travel influencers in the world, and you gave us your time today. So thank you so much. Obviously, I consider you a leader of the cruise and travel community, so I fully expect to have you back, or at least I will ask you to come back, and I hope that you'll find the time to do that. All the best to you, Scott, and thank you so much for doing what you do and bringing all of the good attention to the travel industry that you do.
Absolutely, Paul. It was my pleasure, and let's do it again soon.
All right, you take care now.
Take care, buddy.
The Joy of Cruising and Cruising Interrupted, each $16.99 plus shipping, and new release, The Joy of Cruising Again for $18.99 can be ordered at the link on thejoyofcruisingpodcast.com. For each of the 3 books, use the discount code Joy of Cruising Podcast and get $4 off. The Joy of Cruising books are also available at Amazon. Order the ebook at Amazon or your favorite online retailer. Stay in touch by joining the Joy of Cruising Podcast Facebook group or following the Joy of Cruising Podcast on Instagram. We're constantly adding new shows. Please leave a review and tell a friend about us. We hope you enjoyed this brief escape to the ocean. See you next week.